Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all well. I hope you all enjoyed that pre-season friendly. It was lovely to have a stream, wasn't it? Norwich City make it 3 wins out of 3 in pre-season. Not that that really matters. And of course, as we begin to dissect what we've just witnessed, it's probably worth caveating that this is pre-season. And of course, I'll probably repeat that line quite a lot throughout this, I would imagine. But of course, Norwich City aren't where they will be at the start of the Premier League campaign. There's lots of issues to work on, etc. But this was a very intriguing performance. It was a noticeable step up from the 2 tests that Norwich City have had so far in pre-season. Obviously, they played Kings Lynn last Friday. They played Lincoln in midweek, although the details of that beyond PLE Malou scoring, you can fill in your head. We didn't find out too much about that one, did we? That was completely behind closed doors today. There was access to a stream, and there were lots of interesting strands, I think, that we can pick out. I'm always very reluctant to analyse these games in too much depth, so I'm going to pick out a series of things that I found interesting within the game, and there were quite a few things, to be completely honest, but I think it is very difficult to draw any sort of deep, meaningful strands out of what this sort of tangibly means for Norwich City's Premier League campaign. Of course, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well, so get them in the comments, and we'll see what you guys thought of it as well. A 2-0 victory over Huddersfield Town, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. Goals from Teemu Pukki and Adam Ida, 2 strikers on the score sheet, which is very encouraging at this side of pre-season. Of course, I suppose we better start with Teemu Pukki, really. He was the man who put Norwich City ahead. Of course, only joined up with Norwich City this week because he's been away at Euro 2020 with Finland. An opportunity of a lifetime, really, for him to represent his country in their first ever major competition. Wasn't fully fit. I don't think that's a secret to anyone, but clearly it was a bit of a trade-off. He couldn't really do his injury sort of more harm, I suppose. So to have that opportunity to represent his country, even though he wasn't at full fitness, is something that's going to live with him for a lifetime. And I guess the opposite of that is having a player who's possibly sulking or disappointed maybe for a year and a half or whatever, and Norwich didn't really need that. So he has recovered, he is fully back, and he did look pretty sharp actually in his opening pre-season campaign. It was almost a trademark finish from him, wasn't it? Lucas Rupp surged through. I think he's been excellent, Lucas Rupp, actually, in both actually the Kings Lynn game and today. I thought he was very busy, very lively, looked a lot more like the Lucas Rupp we saw at the start of the Championship campaign when he played alongside Ollie Skip, and looked pretty impressive before getting an injury which sort of ruled him out of that. And he's beginning to look pretty good as well, carries the ball forward nicely, has a nice dynamic to him. Of course, we didn't really see a lot of him in central midfield in the Premier League. I did think his central midfield partner was probably slightly more impressive, but we'll come on to him in just a moment. It was Rupp's sort of slip pass through to Teemu Pukki, and then just a beautiful sort of trademark chip over Nichols, a really sort of aware finish, a really cute finish, a sublime finish. And Teemu Pukki has opened his account technically for the 2021-22 campaign. And of course, it will be good for Norwich City to get him as many goals as they can in pre-season. If he can head into the Premier League with some goals behind him, then that's always a positive for any striker. It doesn't matter even though this is pre-season, as we say, it doesn't really matter what environment or situation. Goals breed confidence, and we all know from the last Premier League campaign that Teemu Pukki will need that if he is to consistently fire in goals for Norwich City that will extract points. So that was the first goal. Teemu Pukki's returned. Some nice link-up play from him. Obviously, plenty more to come as he ramps up his preparations and fitness. But I think it's a fair assumption that he will be Norwich City's starting striker. Although Adam Ida, I felt, looked pretty impressive as well. We'll come on to him. In terms of, before we sort of zoom in on individual players, some interesting sort of themes that I noticed. Pressing. Norwich City looking to engage their opponents higher up the pitch, which is probably something I didn't feel they really had probably the players to do 2 years ago, actually, and really suffocate opponents and try and win the ball high up the pitch. And particularly when you've got players like Milo Rashica, Teemu Pukki as well, Todd Campbell, who likes to operate in tight spaces. I think that's a really good trait to have if Norwich City can get that in their game. And there's 2 major shifts for me in what I've seen in 2 of the 3 pre-season games that we've obviously been allowed to watch. And that is the counter-attacking elements in their game. There's a willingness to be strong in transition. We saw that in the opening goal, probably actually when Onel Hernandez came on as well. He was a really good outlet for counter-attacking. And we saw that again today. And their willingness to engage opposition higher up the pitch. Now, Huddersfield are a team that do like to play out from the back. And in many ways, even though they're a Championship test, it was kind of a good a good contest for Norwich City, because they are going to play a lot of teams who are going to dominate the ball, and Norwich are going to have to press them. Their work off the ball is going to be really, well, it's going to need to be competent. It's going to need to be impressive. It's going to need to be strong. And it was pretty good. That said, even though they were pressing well and they were pressing as a collective, which is good to see as well, there was some maybe lack of cohesion with their attacking options. I would argue there was a lack of cohesion generally. I felt with some of their attacking play, particularly in the first half. They really struggled to get Kieran Dowell into the game. Milo Rashica, although drifted in and made a couple of nice runs behind the back line, again, weren't really able to connect possession with him. A lot of the play was coming through Todd Cantwell, who looked very lively again. Teemu Pukki was dropping deep. Leigh Malou was switching play wonderfully at times as well, which we'll come on to. But look, it's not anything I think to be majorly concerned at this stage. But there was, it did look a little bit rusty. It did look like it's not really clicked, which isn't a surprise, given you've chucked Milo Rashica in there, who is a very different player to Emi Buendia. He's someone who wants to stretch defenders, who wants to run onto balls, who wants to score goals, perhaps more than create chances, doesn't drop into those pockets of space looking for possession, wants to sort of sit on the defender's shoulders and get in behind and cause issues with his pace and engage defenders 1v1. It's a very different sort of footballer to Emi Buendia. So those comparisons, which will persist this season, are slightly flawed in the sense you haven't got a like-for-like replacement, and which probably lends itself again to this idea that maybe Norwich are going to shift towards more of a counter-attacking style of play, which I think they will need to do in some of the games because of their lack of possession, their lack of dominance in some fixtures. So if they can improve that attacking cohesion, that will come naturally. The more these players train and play with each other, the more they adapt to any tactical tweaks that Daniel Farke is asking of them. Then I think that has the potential individually to be quite an exciting attacking lineup, but just felt it lacked cohesion today and kind of felt the same at Lynn, to be honest. But as I say, it's pre-season. You have to caveat that. And to me, you can kind of split it down the middle. Norwich have now had their early pre-season, their fitness workouts, and probably from Sheffield United onwards, maybe with the exception of Gillingham, which I don't think is going to be really much more than an operation to test Carrow Road ahead of the big kickoff against Liverpool and their kind of processes for getting fans back into the ground. Certainly Newcastle away is probably going to be the biggest indication in the time where maybe we can look into how they're playing, because it's going to be against the Premier League opponents. So you have to be a little bit wary of how deep you look into these things. But obviously defensively at times they looked a little bit stretched. Worth noting that probably if everyone's fit and available, the four that started at the back, which was Bali Mumba, who I felt was very impressive. Christoph Zimmermann, very composed on the ball. He's perhaps had his doubters since sort of the season ended, but there were some really nice moments from him, actually. Omar Bamadeli, the same, quite composed, although there were a few lapses, a few moments which were a little bit hairy for him, but felt he sort of improved and kicked on as the game went on. And Przemysław Płacheta, who of course is not a left back. So realistically, if Norwich have Max Aarons, Ben Gibson, Grant Hanley and Dimitris Giannoulis all fit and available, then that's a completely separate back four to which they're going to be playing. And of course, Ben Gibson is in particular stepping up his recovery, should feature in Coventry, well, not in Coventry, in Chesterfield against Coventry on Wednesday evening. Grant Hanley beginning to do bits and bobs in team training as well. Max Aarons came on, and then Giannoulis is recovering nicely as well. Hopefully, by the time we get to that Sheffield United fixture next week, we may have 3 of those 4 available, which would be a major step in the right direction. Right, Pierre-Leigh Malou, let's talk about him. I thought he was Norwich City standout player, and I was really intrigued because this was going to be the first sight of him. Obviously, he scored the winner in Wednesday's friendly coming off the bench. That wonderful story of him ending quarantine, then having to wait for all the paperwork to come through, and then it coming through halfway through the game. Wasn't even initially named as a substitute before he got thrown on, and then scored the winner late on. A really nice tale to begin his Norwich City chapter. And he looked very, very good, actually. Some really good moments from him, namely the switches of play, which were excellent throughout the game. It was like poetry in motion, watching the manner in which he switched possession from the right side to the left side, on occasion from the left side to the right side as well, and was just a really composed, experienced presence. This is going to sound really odd, but I'm thinking back to 2 years ago. It was nice to see him conceding fouls high up the pitch. Norwich didn't do enough of that 2 years ago to break up games and stop momentum when opponents had it. He had that as well. There are, for me, still question marks about physicality, whether he can adapt to that in the Premier League. The technical ability for me isn't in doubt, but certainly on the evidence of this, if you can get Billy Gilmour and Kenny McLean around him as a midfield trio, that would be pretty good, I think, and offer you a little bit of everything. There was a willingness to put the ball in and make a challenge. He set the intensity really nicely. Some of his sort of vertical passes were excellent at times as well. And it just kind of orchestrated the play when Norwich were on top in certain phases of the game. And it was a really good performance. And if you have that level-headedness, and you could see that he just oozes experience, over 150 top-flight appearances in Ligue 1 for Nice and Dijon and various, obviously played in lower down the French pyramid as well. If he can bring that experience to Norwich City's midfield, then that could be a really vital component for what they're trying to do in the Premier League next year, particularly if you can get that around someone with the technical capability of Billy Gilmour and with the legs of Kenny McLean. I think that is a midfield trio increasingly. Of course, Norwich City would like to add another, but on their current options, if you could have that as a trio, I think that begins to look very much like a Premier League midfield, and certainly probably a more capable midfield than they managed 2 years ago. Of course, this is only evidence of one fixture, although certainly from what we've heard, he's really raised the standards in training, Leymelu, since he came in. He's really been excellent. I think he's probably raised eyebrows with his quality since he came in, and people are starting to nod their heads and go, okay, this is what a Premier League player looks like, and certainly looked the part in today's pre-season friendly. But of course, as I said right at the outset, and as I'm going to repeat again, it's very difficult to extract that. He now needs to show it consistently across the course of pre-season, and then heading into the Premier League as well when we get there. Some sort of mentions as well. Onel Hernandez, I thought, looked really bright when he came on. Had the beating certainly of Harry Toffolo in those 1v1 situations. Again, strong in the transition, helped Norwich get up the pitch. Really good, really strong running, carried the ball expertly, and looked like a man with a point to prove. And he is playing for his future, I think, to some extent. So it was a good cameo from the Cuban, although probably helps that even though he's had a little bit of a break, probably is a little bit further along because he's been away with Cuba and playing matches internationally. That probably has helped preserve his match fitness to an extent. So maybe you could view him as a step or two ahead of some of Norwich City's players out there. That was a good cameo. Barley Mumba, as I mentioned, I thought was excellent. I think he's had an excellent pre-season, to be honest. He was really good at King's Town. Offers a really good attacking thrust. You can certainly see all the potential there. I think there's still some elements of his game that are slightly raw, and he's not at the level, the kind of polished level that Max Aarons is. But every time I've seen Barley Mumba play, he really excites me in terms of what he can offer and the qualities that he has. And if you can, as Norwich City, I'm sure view as well, if you can mould him into this fullback that's very similar to Max Aarons, then certainly for the long-term health of Norwich City's right-back position, that looks increasingly encouraging. Adam Eder as well looked bright off the bench. He, of course, capped off the victory. Dan Adshead won possession very, very well from midfield. Jordan Hugo keeps it alive. I think it actually comes off the defender and deflects into Eder's path. And then again, we saw a pretty ruthless finish at the Walks last Friday. This was another one. Made no mistake inside the area to sweep the ball past Schofield into the back of the net, and there's some of the celebrations that followed. There's a lot of excitement about Adam Eder inside the building. A general feeling that he may explode, he may catch the Premier League off guard, and certainly 2 goals in the opening 3 matches of pre-season is a good start. As I said, as a striker, no goal is a bad one, is it? Irrespective of a friendly or a cup competition. If you can breed that confidence going in the season, particularly for a young man, he's already got some Premier League experience, obviously, at the back end of the Project Restart campaign. That will undoubtedly help him. Of course, his league debut for Norwich came at Old Trafford against Manchester United. He looked very raw that day. I think if you compare his performance there and maybe where he was compared to now, I think you've got a pretty impressive development for Adam Eder, with plenty more to come as well. So I think there's plenty to be excited about, and they're really the major things I took for the game. As I say, I know plenty of people will look into it and look at lapses in concentration. Worth noting as well, Huddersfield are further ahead in their pre-season plans. Their season kicks off a week earlier than Norwich City, so they are essentially a week further along, and Norwich have beaten them 2-0. I thought Huddersfield looked pretty decent, represented a good test. As I said, they took probably a lot more territory than I was expecting, and as Daniel Farke would have liked. Probably unlucky not to have a goal. Harry Toffolo had a good chance. Scott High had a good chance, but Michael McGovern made a good save. Josh Koroma had a decent chance, but dragged his effort wide. So Probably I'm unfortunate not to get a goal, but given what we saw in April and their trip to Norfolk, I think they'll be much happier with their outlet, with their sort of output here. So that's how I would sum it up. Let me know down below in the comments your thoughts on this fixture. Another win for Norwich City. Not that it means very much at this stage. We are hoping to be in Chesterfield for the game on Wednesday. Norwich City now going up north around York for a sort of mini pre-season camp. They of course play Coventry on Wednesday in Chesterfield before going to Bramall Lane to play Sheffield United next Saturday. Again, 2 more championship opponents. Again, probably Sheffield United a step up, Coventry probably a step up as well. So we're beginning to see pre-season ramp up, 3 weeks or thereabouts until the big kickoff against Liverpool at Carrow Road. We've got that friendly against Gillingham to look forward to. It feels like the next week or so is going to be an exciting one for Norwich City. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're all keeping safe and well, and we'll see you again very, very soon.